Yeah, we're not doctors or giving any medical advice. This show is intended for educational purposes only, and you should talk to your doctor about any medical issues. Now, let's get at it.
Welcome to Chat the Fat, where nutrition authors Nissa, Graun, and TC Hale are going to break down common low-carb mistakes. Let's chat all things low-carb, keto, digestion, and more so you can maximize your results.
Hey, welcome back to Chat the Fat. This is episode 28. I'm TC Hale, and I'm here with the one and only Nissa Graun. We just call her One-In for short. One-In. Hey, One-In, what's up?
I don't think anyone's ever called me One-In, but
They
hi.
will now. One and only, short. One-In.
I was called the Keto Queen today, which I think actually Leanne Vogel is self-proclaimed Keto Queen, but I'll take it.
Yeah, just take whatever you can get. So what's going on?
I am excited about today's episode because I think people are actually going to learn things that can help them see progress with their plan.
We're going to get brainy just a little
Yes.
bit. We'll probably get some things wrong, but we're going to get brainy a little bit and kind of dig into why isn't this working and why does this happen and what is this problem? So we're going to do something really awesome, and we're going to do a case study with an actual human being.
We are one of our Keto Decoded members. So today we have a special case study from one of our Keto Decoded members. So from time to time, we run a special where we allow people to register for our Keto Decoded membership, and they receive a big discount when they opt for an entire year of our amazing support. As an incredible bonus with this deal, Tony and I do a case study for you and go over all of the details on a podcast episode, just like the one we're going to do today.
We're going to do it right now. It's going to happen.
We are. And when we review your case study, you receive the same insights that Tony's personal clients receive, but you get it for free when you register as a Goal Crusher member, which is our annual pay option. Getting this insight for free with your annual membership is an amazing deal since Tony charges way more for his clients than our Gold Crusher members pay. But this deal is definitely worth signing up for only when it's available. So definitely check to make sure it is available. And when you see it, snatch it up because it won't be there for long. If you want to learn more about this deal, or if you want to find out when you can get this amazing deal, go to kickitnaturally.com/annual pay.
Yeah, and you'll see kind of with everything that we go over, we might not even fit all this in one episode. It's probably going to go 2 episodes. But when you see all that we kind of go through, you'll see that, wow, this takes a lot of work. So we definitely can't leave this open all the time because I won't have time to fold my socks. So we just do it when my schedule allows it, and we let some, enough people in, or where I'm like, okay, that's going to be too many. Let's shut it down for a little bit. But if you get it, it's kind of like what I do with my clients, where I have my clients do their self-tests so that we can actually have something to look at. We want to analyze something. We don't want to just guess at what's going to work. We want to know what's going to work for the person. So we look at all their physiology, but then I also send this huge questionnaire where people kind of go through, and it just kind of talks about, are you hungry at this time? How much do you sleep here? Do you have allergies? All these different kind of questions. It's literally hundreds of questions. And then they send that back, and I go through that. And then from that information, I'll usually ask more follow-up questions like, you said this happens. When does it happen? And how bad? And how long has that been going on? And this just kind of gives me insights into how a person's body is kind of actually working. So it's kind of the same thing I do with my online clients when you're getting this case study thing. But instead of me putting together a whole plan and a person having access to me, through email, we just do the information on this show. And then since all of these people are Keto Decoded members, they have access to our private support group, where after they hear this, they can come and ask questions like, okay, I'm doing this. But instead of this happening, now my hair is orange. Is it wrong? And then they can just ask questions.
So beyond their hair not turning orange, would you say that once people get the results back and they put those into action, they're just receiving far better results and figuring out some of the pieces to their puzzle?
Yeah, or they get the results faster, because usually my ability is just to help people troubleshoot things a lot faster. I've, worked with hundreds of clients and thousands of book readers, and just through experience, I see that when somebody's having an issue, when they start taking a step, that usually taking this step instead will correct that. So it's a lot of it is just getting rid of a lot of that trial and error, and man, I did things wrong for 6 months and then finally figured out that I just need to do this, and all of a sudden weight starts coming off. So that's the kind of the thing, that the benefit that a person really gets.
So not only will people get a year of our amazing support, but they will save a ton of time and frustration and start the healing process a whole lot sooner with your insights. So I think it's definitely a great deal to check out.
Right. And this would be great even if they didn't go through the Keto Decoded course, because it's kind of like working with me as a client. But guess what? When somebody signs up for this, they also just paid for the Keto Decoded course for a year, which means they're going to go through that. And it's hundreds of videos. There's a lot of information in there, and a lot of people are going to find errors before they even start making them, just by going through the course.
And I'm not sure if you saw, but I just saw Suzanne commented in our Keto Decoded course. And since she learned all the information in the course, she's down 80 pounds.
So 80 is a good number to be down as far as pounds go.
Yes, and she just she keeps going, and now she's training for marathons and doing things she never thought she'd do. So the information is pretty valuable.
Right. It helps you cheat. We're all about cheating. We don't
All
we
right,
don't we don't play with the work hard camp. We play with the work smart camp.
we do. And so today we are going to review Elizabeth's case to help her figure out why she's been dealing with weight loss stalls for most of her life, which I'm sure many of us can relate to. We are going to look deeper at her chemistry and go over a bunch of questions that Tony asked her to gain more insights into how her body is operating. Now, you need to keep in mind that Tony and I are not doctors, and we are not giving Elizabeth or any other listeners any medical advice. We're simply sharing insights about the issues that Elizabeth is dealing with and how her chemistry might line up with those issues, along with the steps that might help improve these issues for someone dealing with similar imbalances. When we do a case study like this, we are going to make an imbalance guide for the person so you can follow along with their numbers and learn which imbalances are jumping out. So this is going to help you better understand how to read your own imbalance guide when you test your chemistry numbers. So if you'd like to get Elizabeth's imbalance guide right now, you can go to the show notes page at chatthefat.com/episode 28.
So this is kind of what it looks like if you're watching the video. If you're listening on the podcast, then this is worthless, what I'm doing right now. But this is the imbalance guide that we teach people how to use in all of our books, in our almost free 4-week digestion course. So if you haven't taken that, it kind of teaches you how to do the self-test and then take that information and figure out what imbalances might be going on. So you can go to kickitnaturally.com/keto digest if you want to just sign up for the digestion course. It's only 50 cents. So,
And for those not watching, he was just holding his imbalance guide up to the screen. So you could just go to chatthefat.com/episode 28, print out that guide and hold it up, and you'll know exactly what he was doing.
right. And so when we're going through this case study like this, we're not telling Elizabeth what to do. We're just saying, we're just going to kind of want to walk through where her numbers are, the symptoms and issues that she's dealing with, and how we have seen those issues line up before, and what imbalances are usually causing those, or what kind of digestive malfunctions might be causing those, and what steps we've seen other people see improvement when they took those. So we're just kind of sharing insights here. We're not necessarily giving any type of advice to anybody.
Yes, but sharing those insights can really help teach you a ton about yourself. So even if you're not Elizabeth, definitely listen in for the rest of the information.
Yeah. What's great about when we do these too is when we're done recording this, we'll edit it and then we'll send it to Elizabeth, because this probably won't come out for a month or so after we actually record it. But for the person who's doing the case study, we want to get them the info right away. So we send them a sneak peek of the episode that they get to hear way before anybody else.
All right. So let's start with looking at the stats that Elizabeth sent us. So her main goal is she wants to lose weight. She is 4 feet 11 and she currently weighs 295 pounds. Now, if you've read the Kick Your Fat in the Nuts book or the Digestion course, you'll know that you need to take certain numbers to help you see if you have any chemistry imbalances. So her numbers were a urine pH of 5.7, a saliva pH of 6.7. Her blood pressure reading at the time was 138/70, but she did make a note that it's often much higher than this. Her breath rate is 15, and her fasting blood sugar is 91.
Right. So those aren't all possible numbers, but there are a lot of numbers. So we can get some insights by looking at that. And then when we look at her symptoms and what she's dealing with, and then we compare that to those numbers, then all of a sudden we have something to analyze.
And when you take that digestion course that Tony mentioned earlier, you're going to understand what these numbers mean and how changing them can help you improve your health and also help speed up your weight loss.
Right.
So when we do these case studies, Tony sends that long questionnaire he talked about with symptoms that people are dealing with. And from those answers, he asks more follow-up questions in order to gain more insights into how that person's body might be operating. So here are some of the key issues that Elizabeth seems to be dealing with on top of her trouble losing weight. So she mentioned that she had issues with diarrhea, motion sickness, uncontrollable cravings near her period when doing low carb or keto, fingernail issues, skin issues, joint pain, allergies, asthma type symptoms, light colored stool, low energy while on low carb, and joint pain that improves with low carb. And I feel like I just did one of those medical commercials with all the side effects of drugs.
Right. Yeah. You may experience hot dog fingers and epileptic. Yeah. So it's a lot of issues. And, you might look at that and be like, oh gosh, she's going to try and fix all that. This is a big mouthful to try and improve. But not only when you understand the underlying causes of some of these issues, you can see that it might just be one or two problems that if you worked on that could improve, more than one of these symptoms. But these symptoms also could give us really big clues as to why she might have trouble losing weight and, have cravings around her periods, all those things, all those roadblocks that are stopping her from reaching her goals.
So I will say, while this is a long list, when I first started, my list was probably at least double, and I improved everything. So there is
Right.
hope.
Right. And Mrs. list of symptoms was like 2 episodes long.
Yeah,
So.
it was very long. All right, so here are some of the supplements that Elizabeth's been taking. She has been taking CoQ10 and 5,000 IU of D3, and she also takes naproxen for joint pain.
Right. So before we recorded this, Elizabeth kind of let me know that she's already been seeing a lot of improvement. So I sent her an email asking her, let us know what steps you've taken and what improvements that you're seeing already before we dig into any of this stuff. And that could give us even more clues. Let's see what she wrote back.
So for the rest of the episode, I am going to be playing the part of Elizabeth, and I will let you know what she said.
And I'll be playing Johnny Depp.
Awesome. I think he's kind of a junkie now, but
dang.
Yeah. All right.
I saw him in front of Pete's Coffee one day.
Oh, awesome.
He looked dreamy. Yeah, he was dreamy.
All right. So here's what Elizabeth had to say. I have to start off by saying I am an information junkie. When I want to solve a problem, I'm like a dog with a bone until I find a solution. My weight loss problem has been the biggest challenge. I've read a lot of weight loss books in hopes of finding the answers to simple question behind my weight loss issue of why can I do well on a weight loss plan for several months, then fall back into old habits? And why don't I have energy everyone else claims to have? I listened to podcasts and scoured the internet in hopes of finding the answer. Several years ago, Jimmy Moore set me on a new path and opened my eyes to keto, self-testing, and biohacking. A lot of information I learned from him resonated, but it wasn't until I read Kick Your Fat in the Nuts that I was like, well, no wonder. So, to answer your question, one of the biggest changes that led to the biggest improvement was learning that I need to fix my digestion first. I purchased Bile Flow, Digestion, and HCl, and I'm working on fixing my digestion. You taught me that if your digestion isn't working correctly, you could be doing everything textbook and still not get the results because your body can't process the food you're eating. In one swoop, you gave me the answer to a problem that I've been dealing with for over 20 years. If I'm not digesting the food I'm eating, I won't get the energy I need. If I'm not getting the energy I need, my body will start to crave easy, digestible foods, which is junk food, so it can function. So I now need to fix my digestion so my body can process the higher fat keto foods so I can start to burn fat for fuel. For an information junkie, this was gold. The second biggest change is more physiological and came from listening to you, Nissa, Kenna, and Will. You all broke down the myths that all you need is willpower or to decrease calories and increase exercise. That is just simple math. I've heard these myths my whole life, and now I feel vindicated that I'm not weak or lazy. It's more about chemistry, duh. Another change that I've embraced is that just because this and that worked in the beginning doesn't mean it will work forever. The addition of SelfTest have really helped provide a visual of when my body shifts out of one imbalance and levels off and then may go into another imbalance. This is a big one. Silly me. I just thought once I fixed an imbalance, it stayed fixed. Nope. Thank you again for your help and guidance.
So that was good, like playing Elizabeth. I actually thought you were Elizabeth for a minute
So
there.
did I.
Yeah. So you really got into the character there.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's a really big piece of information. And we'll kind of talk about some of her other symptoms that can give us clues as to why she would do so well on a diet. And then all of a sudden, wow, I'm doing horrible on this diet and I've gained all my weight back.
All right, so let's go back and review each of the symptoms that she's dealing with and talk about how some of those issues can relate back to her physiology. So, just to review, the issues that she was dealing with include diarrhea.
Let's kind of go through them one at a time and just kind
Oh,
of
you
talk.
want to go one by one? Okay.
Yeah, we'll just kind of
So,
talk about
first one,
it. Yes,
diarrhea.
diarrhea, right? And this is going to be a huge thing for anybody trying to lose weight, especially if they are, going to do some type of low carb or keto situation, because when you have a chronic diarrhea or just it's loose stools all the time and you're going 3 or 4 times a day, you're not really assimilating any of the food. You don't have time to assimilate it because it's racing through your intestinal tract and shooting out the back door. So there's no time to acquire the nutrients in that food, assimilate them into the body, and use that nutrition to fuel your body and to allow your body to get what it needs for all those functions that it has to do. So I've almost seen nobody succeed with weight loss when they're dealing with chronic diarrhea, unless their body's just mm, disintegrating and they're eating away at all their muscle tissue and just everything is going. So you really have to fix a diarrhea issue if you hope to improve any type of cravings problems, whether the cravings are nonstop or if they're just really showing up a lot around your period, like it was for Elizabeth.
So, with diarrhea, obviously, if you're someone who has a lot of diarrhea and you're losing weight and you get to kind of a sickly state, that's obviously due to malnutrition. Is that the same thing for people who have chronic diarrhea, but they don't lose weight? Are they still experiencing another form of malnutrition?
Well, the big thing, like diarrhea is one of the, like when you look at statistics, like more people die of diarrhea than just about anything. But that's because we're looking at all the third world countries where people get illnesses that create a lot of diarrhea and then they can't, gain any nutrients and they die of malnutrition. But in this country, we have a trick where when you're not getting nutrients, you can just eat some vanilla wafers. And you don't really, though it's very easy to pull fuel out of. You can pull glucose out of that, turn it into fuel and allow your body to function and survive. But you get to gain a lot of weight or never lose weight when you're doing that. But since we have so much junk food here that's easier to break down without proper digestion, we don't see people die from diarrhea here. We never even hear about that. When I first saw that statistic, I was like, what are you talking about? But so that's why a person can gain weight to where you would see in like a third world country diarrhea causing malnutrition, and the person looks like a skeleton with a big puffy gut. You know, it's usually what they look like. But here we just see people gaining weight. It's because the diarrhea is restricting the person's ability to control what they're eating and to eat sensibly or to eat real food and all those things that help us lose weight. And by the lack of absorption of any nutrients, it's causing them to eat things that are going to make the weight loss impossible and usually result in weight gain.
Okay. All right. So definitely a good idea to improve that. And then her next symptom that she talked about was motion sickness.
Right. And what's interesting about Elizabeth is when we look at her numbers, her blood pressure is like 138 over something. And she says sometimes it goes even higher. So motion sickness is almost always due to a lack of minerals in the system so that signals can't travel correctly. They're not traveling correctly from the brain to the body and from the body back to the brain. There are a couple other issues that can cause like motion sickness and especially vertigo type things, but they're a little more rare. So usually it's a lack of minerals. And if she has diarrhea, a lack of minerals makes sense for her. But then we say, well, why is her blood pressure so high? We're going to look at a couple other things in a few minutes that will is definitely contributing to her blood pressure being higher. But we also see that one of her symptoms a little further down the list is that she has light-colored stool. And a light-colored stool is a very strong indication that bile is not flowing correctly. And diarrhea is also a very common issue when bile is not flowing correctly. There are other causes of diarrhea, but when bile is not leaving the gallbladder and meeting that acid product that's leaving the stomach, there's nothing to neutralize that acid. So when the food you just started breaking down in your stomach and is now acidic moves into the first part of the small intestine, it's too hot. And it basically can start breaking down your intestinal tract. And the body's like, we don't want this. So the body draws all the water that it can from anywhere in the body that it can to that intestinal tract to cool it off and to speed it through the system and out the back door so that you're not digesting your own innards, your own guts. So this light-colored stool is a strong indication that the bile is not flowing correctly. And the bile is how the body takes out garbage. The liver filters out all this junk that comes into the body, and it filters it into the liver, and it puts it in the bile, and then sends that to the gallbladder so that when the body uses that bile to neutralize the acid, it also now goes out the back door. So this is where filth goes, is out the bile. So when bile is not moving, the trash is not going out. So now all that trash gets reabsorbed into the system, into the bloodstream, and it thickens up the blood and it raises a person's blood pressure. So a person can have high blood pressure or even blood pressure in a good range, and you think, oh, their electrolytes are great, but the reality is that their blood pressure is higher because they have all this garbage in the blood, not all of this mineral that should be there, but garbage. So the fact that she gets motion sickness and blood pressure is still good or high is a strong indication that there's a lot of junk in the system and the liver is getting just overwhelmed. Because, you know, if you took out the trash to the end of the street and you came back inside and all that trash was back in the house again, you're like, oh, I got to take this trash out again. Plus now there's new trash. So you take that all out, you go back inside, all the trash is back. Oh, now there's more trash. You become overwhelmed until your house is filled with garbage. And it sounds like that there's a good chance that that could be going on in Elizabeth's body, is that her garbage taker outer is just sick of this. They're going on strike.
So a lot of people will tell you to get rid of the garbage, to drink more water. Since her blood pressure is high, I know you would say that's okay, but what else should she do?
Well, she's got to fix the bile flow. And, we take steps, and we'll talk about this towards the end in more in depth, but we use a product called Beet Flow. It's basically beet greens, because beet greens help to thin out the bile. And there's other steps that she can take. We'll go over those a little bit more in the end when we're talking about steps to take to improve all these issues. But she has to fix the bile flow so that the garbage can leave the body. Now, when the garbage leaves the body, now all of a sudden the liver isn't overwhelmed. It can actually focus more on all these other functions that it needs to do, because the liver does a lot more than just remove filth. We're going to talk about some of this a little bit later with some other issues that Elizabeth seems to be having going on. But when you fix that bile flow, you're also going to now have something to neutralize the acid leaving the stomach, which means you fix the diarrhea, and now the body actually gets to assimilate nutrients. And when the body has the nutrients it needs, it doesn't scream for nutter butters.
All right. So the next symptom that she listed was uncontrollable cravings near her period when doing low carb or keto. So that's probably when she's stocking up on nutter butters.
Right. And we know that this is just because all girls go psycho around their period. Next question.
That is not true. But
That is not true. Weird. Okay. So I do have a book all about menstrual cramps that explains all the issues that go on around a girl's period. But that cycle, that process takes a lot of resources to complete that process. There's a lot of resources that go into that. So if a girl doesn't have a lot of resources, the body will start pulling from all of its reserves. It'll start pulling nutrients out of the tissues, out of the bones, anything that it can do to get a hold of those nutrients to help that cycle continue. Now, there are cases where the body's like, I got nothing. I got all my reserves. I'm trying to pull whatever I can. It's not working out. I'm shutting it down. And then the girl loses her period, or her cycle is all wacky, and it's like only shows up every 3 months, or she goes into early menopause and all those kinds of situations. It's usually because digestion is not pulling enough nutrients out of the food we're eating to give the body what it needs. So when the resources are low, the body's like, I have an idea. If you just get me some glucose, I could use the glucose for a lot of these other functions, and then I could put more of these resources towards this cycle, this menstrual cycle that we're trying to complete. So I do remember that time you ate those ding dongs, that you broke it down like that. There was like sugar, like instantly, go get me ding dongs.
So I think there are people yelling at you right now because they want to know what you mean by resources.
Resources are, when we eat food, the body can't use a peanut butter sandwich. That's worthless to the body. Just like your car can't run on crude oil. You can't go to the Beverly Hillbillies' house, have the oil that's shooting up out of their backyard, and then put that in your car. Your car won't run. So it has to be processed and turned into gasoline. So food has to be broken down into these resources like vitamins, minerals, amino acids. The fats have to be emulsified and broken down into a form that the body can use them. All of those things are resources. So the body takes it from the food we eat. It uses them right away. It stores others for safekeeping for when it's low. And so it has all of these resources. Are people still yelling at me?
No, I think you explained it. They're better. All right. So the next.
So one thing what I want to say is that that's why cravings are often a lot higher around a girl's period, because the body's like, I don't have enough to do this. Give me more. It's also why emotional issues escalate around a girl's period, because a lot of emotional issues are the result of a lack of nutrients and minerals that don't allow the brain to communicate correctly. And so things that might be a problem, but they might be a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, are viewed as a 10 because the body is in just this emergency state.
And I think a lot of girls think that, the cramps that they get or the emotional problems, that's just life and they have to deal with it. And
Mhm.
that's something that will happen forever. And I can attest that I don't think I was ever emotional because I'm not an overly emotional person, but I did have like the cramps and I didn't feel good for a day or two. And once I started improving digestion and once I started eating the right foods, like it's barely even noticeable to me. So it definitely can improve.
Right. And I've had a lot of clients, and this was the first niche that I basically broke into, is because I helped some girl fix her cramps when she had a situation where for like a week around her period, she was balled up in the fetal position on the floor and couldn't move. So she had to call into work. It was like ruining her life. And it had been like that for decades. Um, and she fixed it in a month. And of course, all of her friends started showing up at my office like, hey, you're the guy that, you know.
It's interesting because some of the members of our Keto Decoded membership, they reach out to me because this is kind of a personal question. So they'll reach out to me via email and ask me how to improve these issues. And I have to send them back to our support group because you're clearly the expert here.
Right, which is sad that a guy, and I just tell people, well, look, I never get menstrual cramps. So obviously I know what I'm doing.
Exactly. All right. So the next issue that Elizabeth listed was fingernail issues.
Right. And this is common for fingernails to be weak, or they crack, or they have all the bridges and stuff like that. And it's because the fingernails and hair are made of protein and things that the body's getting rid of. So when the body can't break protein down into amino acids, it doesn't have those building blocks and the fingernails can get weak. So that makes sense then, since she's having a lot of digestive issues.
Okay. And she also listed skin issues.
Well, let's have Nissa talk about that.
Well, I think that could be a lot of different things. So maybe if she was more specific, but definitely related to your bile flow. And if that's not moving, I had a lot of cystic acne. I also had really itchy skin for a long time. So I had plenty of my own skin issues when it came to my bile not flowing correctly.
Right. Because if the bile can't take out the trash, the body can try to push some of that trash out through the skin and it'll clog up pores and cause problems that way. But if the bile can't emulsify the fats, now those fats are undigested. So instead of giving your body fuel and resources, you're now giving your body a problem. It's a burden now. The body has to try and get rid of it because it can't use this undigested fat. And when it pushes that out through the skin, then you get the really bad acne issues.
Okay. And then she also listed joint pain, but she did make a note that her joint pain improves when she does a low carb plan.
So we don't know for sure because there's a variety of causes that can create joint pain. You never know if, like, is all the connective tissue being eaten away and it's just bone on bone, or is it more of a calcification issue? And for most people in this situation, what happens is calcium follows sugar. That's kind of how it works in the body. So when we eat sugar, the calcium that's in the tissues, and it really needs to be in the tissues. The calcium has a lot of functions there. Um, if there's not enough calcium in the tissue, those menstrual cramps are going to be like 30 times worse. That's always one of the biggest factors when it comes to menstrual cramps. Uh, but your immune system functions by calcium being in the tissues. But when you eat sugar, the calcium is like, "Ooh, I want to go play with that sugar." And it chases it just like you chase an ice cream truck, because the ice cream truck has sugar. So the calcium follows the sugar, and then the sugar gets burned up, and then the calcium just gets dropped. So then it often can get deposited in the wrong place and create issues like, bone spurs and calcifications and arthritis that are due to calcium being in the wrong place. So that's likely the cause of her joint pain, because when she goes low carb, her joint pain improves. So if it was one of the other common causes of joint pain, it probably wouldn't improve as quickly as when she just goes low carb.
Okay. And then she also listed allergies.
Yeah, and she has some asthma type symptoms too, so we'll just do these together. and her numbers don't show her to be parasympathetic right now. But basically, the autonomic nervous system goes back and forth from the sympathetic fight or flight state and the parasympathetic rest and digest state. And a lot of factors can dictate how far the body goes in one position. But when a person has allergies or asthma, they're often very overly parasympathetic. And when that state is in an imbalanced state, it creates these allergy and asthma type symptoms. And most allergy medications work by pushing a person very sympathetic into that fight or flight state, and then their symptoms go away. So we see that if you can just fix this imbalance, those symptoms go away too. But when digestion isn't working correctly, the body was like, okay, well, I'm just going to push the body as hard as I can into the rest and digest parasympathetic state to boost digestion any way that I can. So then they become very parasympathetic and their allergy symptoms magnify, and asthma symptoms can show their head as well. A person doesn't always get both, but they often do. And doctors will even say, oh, you have allergy-induced asthma. And that just, it's not caused by the allergies. It just happens that the same underlying cause of the allergies is also what's the underlying cause for the asthma. So this could be an issue for her that just kind of shows up when digestion is at its worst. And maybe other factors are pushing her even further into that parasympathetic state that's making these ones. Because she says they don't show up all the time. Like she doesn't need to take medications for them and stuff.
Okay, and then her next one that relates to digestion is light-colored stool.
Right, and we talked about that a lot. That's just from a lack of bile flow.
And the last one I think is kind of a big deal because when people go on keto, they rave about all of this extra energy they have and how good they feel. But there's still a lot of people that start low carb or keto and they have really low energy.
Right, and this is always going to be the case when you take away your body's fuel source. If you ate nothing, and I'm not talking about fasting or anything like that, but like if you just never ate food, your energy wouldn't be so super great because you don't have any fuel. So if you take away the fuel source that your body is using, again, you don't have fuel. So you might be increasing your fat, but if you don't have the ability to emulsify those fats because your bile is not flowing correctly, then you're not turning those fats into fuel for your body. You're just giving it more of a burden. Now it needs to use more fuel to try and get rid of this burden. So this is almost always the case when somebody tries to change to a diet that their body can't process. So most people, they need to fix their digestion before they go keto, or they're just going to be zapped and they're going to have no energy.
And it's obviously the same thing if they're not digesting the protein they're eating.
Right. If they can't break that down, that's not a resource either. Now it's just a problem.
Okay. So those are all of the symptoms that relate back to digestion.
And also, but a lot of people have their digestion working fine. So when they go keto, it's like magic. Like, oh man, I feel great. This is amazing. Because the real benefit of keto for energy is not just the fact that you have this backup fuel source that's always there. The biggest factor for a lot of people is that you're removing the spikes and the crashes. Because when a lot of people eat carbs, they get that spike, but then the blood sugar crashes, and by 3 o'clock, they're a zombie and they have no energy. But when you're not eating all those carbs, now your blood sugar just stays on an even keel, and there is no zombie period. So the person just kind of views it as, wow, I have all this energy because they didn't crash. It's not like they're electrocuted and need to run around because I'm like a 3-year-old on, that just has all this. It's just that you don't get the crash and you just always feel good. So it seems like you've magnified your energy.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so now we were going to get into some of the more specific questions that Elizabeth had.
Right, so when I looked at all of her questionnaire answers, that triggers other questions that I want to ask her. So these are the questions that I asked her along with the answers that she had. So let's go through a few of these, but we're kind of going over. So we're going to have to cut this episode short. And then we will pick up next episode talking about the rest of her questions and looking at, imbalances and steps that she could take to improve.
Okay. So the first question that you asked Elizabeth was, how long have you been taking D3? What made you start taking it? And what made you increase to 5,000 IU in February? And her response was, her doctor originally tested her about 10 years ago. She started taking the 5,000 IU supplement back then and was consistently taking it until last fall when she decided to stop altogether. Then she took a test again in February, and that said that her vitamin D was low, so she started taking it again. And she's just taken the 5,000 IU amount based on her doctor's advice.
Okay, so this is, and we're certainly not going to tell her to do anything against what her doctor says, but we are going to provide her with information and she can make her own decisions. So if you want to understand this better, go to kickitnaturally.com and just search for vitamin D. And we have a podcast episode all about just vitamin D. But it works like this. Vitamin D helps us pull calcium out of the intestinal tract into the bloodstream so that the body can use it. So in that regard, vitamin D is a huge hero. And without vitamin D, we would not be able to pull calcium into the intestinal tract and use it. And the body has a lot of functions that really need calcium. So it's really crucial. Here's what happens. Let's jack up that vitamin D dose to 5,000 and 10,000 IU, like so many doctors are telling us to do now. And it doesn't just suck the calcium from the intestinal tract into the bloodstream. It turns into this huge shop vac that sucks calcium from everywhere into the bloodstream. And it makes the bloodstream calcium retentive. It makes it so that that calcium can't leave the bloodstream and go to the places that it needs to go. It also means that you're pulling calcium out of the tissues where it needs to be for the immune system to function at all, where it needs to be for you not to have horrible menstrual cramps, where it needs to be so that your muscles can contract and relax. So it pulls all of that out, and it can even pull it out of your bones. So for the time period that they've been promoting vitamin D like this, you can also look at the rise of osteoporosis that goes along right with it, because huge doses of vitamin D not only don't fix osteoporosis, they're the perfect recipe for osteoporosis. So when someone is pulling this much calcium out of it, the body will try to pee it out, and you'll see their urine pH go a little bit higher. You can also see their blood pressure go higher because calcium thickens up the blood and makes the blood pressure higher. So this can be great for somebody who's has major depression issues and their blood pressure is 99, over 80. I love those people to use a little bit of vitamin D because it can thicken up that blood. But when you use too much, you're going to be creating a lot of problems. And we see here that Elizabeth has high blood pressure. We know that's probably partially due to the bile not flowing correctly, the junk accumulating in the system. But now that we see that she's taking this huge dose of vitamin D, we know that that's probably thickening up the blood as well. And you say, well, but what about her blood tests? They showed that her vitamin D was low. Well, what happens is the same way that vitamin D pulls calcium out of the tissues, so does sugar. Remember, calcium follows sugar. So when sugar is high in the bloodstream, which is very common for someone who's starting to lean insulin resistant, when that sugar is high, it's pulling all this calcium out of the tissues, which is it's shutting off the immune system when you're doing that and all these other functions. So the body says, I have an idea. I'm going to reduce the amount of vitamin D that I'm assimilating and bringing into the system so that vitamin D isn't also pulling calcium out of all the tissues. So Mother Nature is trying to fix a problem, but then your doctor says, oh, your numbers are low, and that's bad. We see low vitamin D with people who are insulin resistant, and we see low vitamin D with heart attack victims. So you should just raise your vitamin D. But the insulin resistant and heart attack issues are not caused by low vitamin D. It's just the body trying to fix the problem by turning down vitamin D, but then we just tell the body to shut up and cram more in there.
But what would you say to someone that maybe has been keto for a while or has improved insulin resistance, and what if their blood work still shows low vitamin D?
Well, again, what I like to do is look at somebody's urine pH. And if their urine pH is like 6.0 or higher, then you don't want to add more vitamin D because you already have a lot of calcium floating around the system. You don't want to pull more out of that. Most people are usually looking for a problem. Like, I have low bone density, so I need to add vitamin D. When you could add vitamin D, but if you don't have any of the building blocks for bones, the vitamin D isn't going to do anything. So the person usually needs to work more on lifting all of the resources and improving digestion so you can get resources out of the food that you're eating more than you need to take a vitamin D and calcium supplement.
Okay. And you had mentioned that because she said she's taking 5,000 IU and you thought someone should take a smaller dose, but what does that mean?
Right. So there's a supplement that I use with all of my low blood pressure clients. It's not available to the public. It's only available through a health coach. It's called electrolyte deficiency by Empirical Labs. So you can't go and find it and buy it without a health coach. But I like it because it has this small dose of vitamin D. Like each dose has something like 80 to 100 IU. So you're giving that person the vitamin D. And for a lot of people, that vitamin D is crucial. Like we talked about, it helps pull calcium into the system. They need it. So maybe they need a little more of that if they're not getting any sunshine. So maybe even a higher dose. But once you're going up into this 2, 3, 5,000, 10,000, these huge numbers that people are taking, then it starts to cause more trouble. So don't view what I'm saying as vitamin D as bad. It's a lifesaver. It's amaze balls. You got to have it. But you just got to watch the dose, and you can watch it by looking at your urine pH and adjusting how much you're taking according to that. You can also look at your blood pressure. If your blood pressure is high, you don't want vitamin D making it higher. The reason that they see low vitamin D with high blood pressure, because most people with high blood pressure have high blood sugar. So the body is turning down vitamin D so it doesn't, the sugar is already pulling too much calcium out of the tissues. It doesn't want vitamin D pulling out more. Okay. So let's have that be the last question for this one. And we're going to pick up with the other questions in the next episode, which will be episode 28.5. So it'll come out later this week. You won't have to wait until next week to hear it.
All right.
Anything else we have before we close?
No, I think that is it until we see you in episode 28.5.
Okay, so if you want to download the data sheet or see any of the links that we talk about, just go to chatthefat.com/episode 28, and we'll see you later in the week to talk more about Elizabeth's case in episode 28.5.
Whether you're brand new to keto or just looking to move past roadblocks, join us for our next Troubleshooting Keto Master Workshop. Go to chatthefat.com/workshop to find upcoming dates and register for this totally free event. You just might find your missing piece of the puzzle. Until then, we'll see you next week on Chat the Fat.